looking for things that fit the pattern that it wants. Oh, fascinating. That's fascinating. Okay, let's see what time it is. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Can you guys hear me okay? So I first want to thank you for coming today because, as I was just saying to Robert, who's in front of us at the Career Center, I really was not sure that anybody would sign up for this, although I do feel it's a very pressing topic. And it's a topic that obsesses me, the question of are the machines going to take everybody's job? Because we know that I'm Jennifer Steele, I'm in the School of Education. My training is in education policy and the economics of education. So a lot of what I do is about, what I'm interested in right now is how to help our students transition into the world of work at a time when the world of work is changing so fast. And not that it's ever been easy, but if you had a college degree for most of my lifetime, that was a pretty good ticket. And that's what we told people in schools. I mean, I study schools. What we've been telling people for 30 years is if you get the degree, you're going to be fine. So follow your passion, study what you like, and the degree is going to be your ticket. And that for a long time was true. There was just this huge causal benefit of earning that degree, that piece of paper, although the benefit does vary by what you study and what your degree is in, because there are different demands for different skills. But a lot of the safest fields, of course, as you know, have been the STEM fields, computer science, programming, because that's where so much of the economic growth was. And so those were considered safer fields, and now everything is changing really fast. So the people that got burned by automation during my lifetime were blue-collar workers, people who worked in factories. And because a lot of routine work, physical work that was routine could be automated. And so, I mean, you know the story. So factories closed, work got offshored, but also robots started doing more stuff. And robots also automated a lot of what we used to pay typists and transcribers and data entry folks to do. It became easier for machines to do routinized white collar work as well. So we started to have, a really high knowledge sector that made a lot of money, and then a large service sector. But that middle has been hollowed out during, the last 40, 50 years. Of course, AI, which only really landed in the public consciousness with large language models at the end of 2022, so about 3 years ago, is really a dramatic change, because what it does is the things that we've been teaching students are safe. It writes really well, it analyzes data really fast, it draws really fast, it communicates in a way that mimics humans very fast, it pattern matches very fast, it searches very fast and synthesizes. So it's really, this is what I worry about, is how do we help our students stay ahead of the curve, and how do we help our students pivot, because they, of course, need to pivot. They're going to need to be able to pivot in their lifetimes. What I'm hearing a lot from folks in the field is that the age of the expert is waning a little bit, because over-specialization makes you vulnerable to displacement. But if you are flexible and you can do a lot of different things and you have generalizable skills, then you can kind of move into, you can leverage technology well, and you can move into places where demand is increasing. So the ability to pivot and be flexible, anecdotally, people believe this is important. So what I'm going to talk about in this session is my data are in part 2, and I'll only spend maybe a third of our 50 minutes together on that, maybe less, but because this is what my research is on right now, is what do we know about what is happening to, which tasks are being automated, how do we know, and what does that look like for jobs? What are they high-paying tasks, who has those jobs? I'm sharing new stuff with you on that today. I've been working on this for a while. I'm not sharing some of the older stuff, so if you've seen me talk on this before, it's not repetitive, but it's not fully comprehensive what I'm sharing today. So, but we are also going to do discussion. So because this is about figuring this out for ourselves at a time when there's no certain answer. So I'm going to first have folks talk to one another and introduce yourselves to one another. Where do you work? What do you do? And we'll do that for about, so let's see. Okay, so when you do your pair, and then I'll do the data after we do the pair share and share out, and then we'll do discussion about what comes next. So the pair share, I'm going to have you talk to a person sitting next to you or near you, and discuss, especially if it's somebody who's not in your field or not in your discipline, because it's interesting to hear what is happening across the university. So if you need to move to be near somebody that isn't as close to what you do, then that could be useful. So the questions you're going to ask are, what are the career path? The questions you're going to answer for one another. What are the career paths that your students are typically have typically chosen? What are you telling students about those paths? And how do those paths, in your estimation, look different from a decade ago? And so this is the question about what is the space that you're facing now as things are changing. And so take about, let's take about 6 minutes, so roughly 3 minutes each, to talk to the person sitting next to you about those 3 questions. First, introduce yourself and what you do. And so I'll pull us back together in about 6 or 7 minutes, and then we'll talk about what is emerging from those conversations. So go ahead and find a partner and discuss. Okay, let's come back together. And as you think about what you heard, what stands out to you? So take a moment to reflect. It's really hard. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Oh, wait. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. This is, I appreciate the conversations that are happening because it speaks to the intensity of what folks are facing in the classroom and what students are facing in the job market. So as you reflect on what you heard in your groups or in your pairs, what is something that you heard from someone in your group or pair that was different from your experience or surprised you or made you think? So I'd just love for a few people to raise their hand to share on something that was different or struck you as surprising. And you can talk about how yours and theirs were distinct. Anybody willing to share on that? So I've got 2 folks. So first we'll go front row and say your name and where you work, and then we'll go to Kate right behind you. Oh, that's very interesting about jobs opening up because of what's happening. There's going to be a gap in civil service. So what happens then? That's crazy. Kate, what about in your group?
for only about 6 months, so I was going through the job application process recently, and there wasn't a single person that interviewed me that wasn't asking about my literacy in AI. So like career related, uh, whether they expect you to use it on a daily basis or not, it's coming up in interviews. So I would say that's something I hadn't experienced in the interview space.
That is so real. I mean, those and the variation are agreed. Many of our students are very skeptical, very, very concerned about AI. Other things that emerged in your conversations that really struck you? What about things that were synchronous, where you're like, yes, I'm having that exact same issue with my students in the job market? Things that were aligned. Yes.
In a roundabout way, we were talking about how there are these jobs that are, in a way, not disappearing. So a couple of years ago, get a bachelor's degree in computer science, you found a job pretty easily. Now, you get a bachelor's degree in computer science, it's extremely difficult to find a job. However, our master's program in computer science has an incredible employability outcome. And so how do you get from that in a time where also people are saying, you don't really have to go and get a master's degree. I mean, I've heard it from industrial, people coming to talk to young high schoolers saying, you know what, yeah, bachelor's okay, you don't really need a master's to come and work in our field. But at the same time, the jobs at that bachelor's level are being taken over by the AI. And so we were talking about the fact that you kind of need to have at least two specializations. So now you have young kids, my son, I'm giving him this advice, take 2 majors. Like SPA has a really great one with data science and political science, or computer science and business. You have 2 very different majors that will help you build something, change something, be innovative, bring added value as a person, human. And that is what we're talking, I'm telling young people about today. It's great you want to do psychology, what's the second major you're going to add to it?
Gosh, that is so great. It speaks to this of being able to pivot, being super flexible, which is a huge lift. I mean, that's twice as much things you got to hold in your noggin at a time when the technology aims to make life simpler. Tell me your name.
Tashina.
And you're in computer science.
GPS.
GPS. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, Uma.
I think that is actually really interesting because there's also a rise of neurodiversity and in some level of overwhelm and in response to that rigidity among young people. So it's just interesting that they have to be more flexible when in fact, especially with the overwhelming use of screens and all that, it's kind of creating a mental rigidity. So we kind of want them to be everything at once.
All the time.
Let me ask you guys. Okay, so I'm going to ask about 3 categories: humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. So think about where you fit, where you put yourself in those 3 categories. If you are humanities, raise your hand. Okay. If you are social sciences, raise your hand. And if you are natural sciences, okay, not as many. Sherry is here. So what about business? I didn't ask about business. Okay. And what about math or computer science? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, and if you are hearing from students that things are especially hard, raise your hand. Okay, yeah, not everybody. And truly, that's probably perennial. If I had asked that in any year and any time in history, probably most people would raise their hands, because when you're young and you're going through it, there's always things of the moment, and it always feels hard, because it is. It's a rocky transition. It's a transition to go to college, and it's a transition to make your way in the world as an adult after college. Okay. So building on what you guys are talking about, let me talk about the challenges that already exist. So on the left, I'm going to show you, this is not specific to AI. This is something that I made in Tableau using labor department data, just to show that there is a huge range in salaries by field. So this is not by jobs, but this is by kind of sector. And so, it's job sector. So this is like the standard occupational classification major category. So this is just to show that the ceiling for if you're at the 10th percentile of what people earn in your field, the floor on the left is not that different based on what field you're in. So when kids are thinking about what do I do that's going to pay me a living wage or a good wage, there's the higher the upside, the higher the 90th percentile in your field, the more variability and uncertainty there tends to be. So in the top row is the legal profession. And as you know, there are public servant, criminal defenders, or advocacy, nonprofit law folks that are making not a lot out of law school. And then there are corporate lawyers who are making a huge money. And so law is a field that's high paying, but also has high variability and hence high risk that students need to be aware of. I can't even read my own freaking slide because my eyes are so horrible. The second one is management. And so again, management comprises, CEOs and CFOs, but it includes many, many layers of administration and management. So this has always been the case that in the lower paying professions, what we think of as the lower paying professions, there's more compression and thus less risk, more predictability. And in the higher paying professions, you've got to think about how do I get to that higher percentile of earnings, which often is done through expertise, through getting more skills, getting the master's degree, getting more years on the job. And so that part of the benefit of expertise does not seem to be changing. And I'm going to show you a little bit of data. But what is changing is the ability to get that expertise because of those entry-level jobs potentially being harder to come by. So the next one is from the labor. It's from the Labor Department, and it's just unemployment. I think it's from Current Population Survey. It's just recent, August 2025, unemployment data showing that unemployment is higher for young workers and higher for college graduates. Usually college graduates are having much lower unemployment. That's the light blue line. Are having much lower unemployment than historically than just all workers, because college graduates have always done well. Oh yeah, actually, recent college graduates is blue. These are the young folks. Red is all college graduates, and typically going to college gets you a better job and keeps you safe from unemployment. But we see that, especially with young people, the light blue line, it's starting to change, and this is 2020, so this is kind of in the wake of the arrival of large language models, which can do a lot of entry-level work. So some people say, well, this is just a blip, this is a business cycle, this is normal, which it may be, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about evidence around that. So, and I don't mean to be a pessimist. The question is, how do we adapt, and how do we help our students adapt given that this is changing super, super fast? Okay, so one issue is that often students simply don't know what they don't know. And so I think all of us can help them understand that the federal government still has tools that are publicly available to show, average wages by academic major, figuring out with the ONET, which is part of the Department of Labor, what are you interested in, what are you good at? So it has free interest assessments, and of course so does American University and our Career Center. And so just knowing that they can search by job categories, level of education, figure out what are people making and what kind of credentials do people need. These tools are out there, they're free, and they're very searchable. Small Business Administration has toolkits to help people figure out how to build a side hustle or build a small business. And then finally, in the bottom right, young people who've never had to support themselves don't know how much money they need to live. So that can really affect their planning in terms of having a pragmatic strategy for paying for an apartment, paying for transportation, paying for health insurance, et cetera. So, the living wage calculator at MIT has very good data on what all of those cost in virtually every part of the United States. So students can see that, to live around here, a living wage is like around $56,000 a year. And you can see how that breaks down by types of expenses. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to kind of make sure that the students are aware of what's out there, especially during times of change, but always. But back to the question of whether the unemployment challenges that students are facing or difficulty finding jobs, whether that is a blip or whether that's something that is caused by large language models, there is some data so OpenAI has released new papers and Anthropic has released new papers, and basically showing with Anthropic that about 36%, more than a third of jobs in the US, this is based on searches to Claude. What are people typing in Claude? And they are linking those to tasks, which they can average up to occupations. And so about more than a third of jobs have at least a quarter of their tasks that people are using AI to do. So that's hard data. That's based on recent data from August 2025. And before that, February 2025. So also there's another econometric paper showing that like right after ChatGPT was released to the public, 3.5 in 2022, that's when you started to see this fall off of freelance jobs postings, specifically in writing and programming, because that's what large language models do. They emulate the generation of text or images. They emulate human text and image generation. So here's the good and bad news. This is the third bullet point is from recent work by Brynjolfsson, who is studying a lot of stuff, who's at Stanford and is doing a lot of this work on causal effects of AI on employment. And so this is happening mostly up to 13% for early to mid-career workers, especially early career workers. Senior workers, much less affected. Even mid-career is less than early careers. The 20s are really being hit hard. And it's not in all fields. It's in fields they show that have the highest exposure to tasks that people are using ChatGPT and Claude to answer because they've categorized these tasks. So, and most important, Anthropic has categorized whether tasks are complementary to humans, meaning they're augmenting what we already do as brilliant humans, or substitution, meaning they're fully automating. We're saying, hey, ChatGPT, I need to write this essay. It's due tomorrow. Here's what it's on. Can you please give me an essay? Thank you. Or, hey, ChatGPT, I have this problem set. I need to finish it. Here are the questions. Please give me the answers and explain how you did them so I can submit it. So when you're giving the task to the technology and the technology is doing the task for you, please reformat this document. Please draft this email. When you're giving it the task or you're giving it the task and tweaking it, it calls that an automation task, not an augmentation task. An augmentation task is, here's what I'm thinking, what do you think of it? Or an augmentation task is also, I'm trying to learn this. Where am I making a mistake? Please explain it to me. Oh, well, what about this? I still don't understand. That's a learning task. So it's your tutor. And a lot of queries are in that vein. And especially with ChatGPT, some queries are like personal expression and kind of like the therapy that you hear people doing with chatbots, but that's not a huge amount. A lot of what's happening is people asking Claude to write code and asking ChatGPT and Claude to write. Those are big things that people are asking them to do. So, okay, so Claude tells us, Anthropic tells us that 50%, no, actually the first one is Chatterjee and Deming and folks at OpenAI. So 56% of work queries with ChatGPT are full automation. Do this task for me. Anthropic tells us that 40% of Claude queries are to that effect, 40 to 43%, and about 70 to 78%, depending on how you classify them, are of business queries to Claude are fully automation, because the API tasks the companies are paying for a little bit for those searches. So companies are really just giving the work to technology and saying, do the task. So a lot of tasks are being fully automated, not just augmented, but there's variation among tasks. And so if we lean into helping students learn to augment and work with, then that is more promising, because Brynjolfsson's data shows that it's the jobs where the tasks are fully automated where you're seeing this employment hit. And it's the jobs where tasks are augmented where you're seeing stability in people's employment, the number of people employed. They used ADP payroll data on 3.5 million people to determine this. So what they call augmentation, I explained what that is. It's validation, it's learning, it's kind of working back and forth. Okay, so this is the part that I did that is kind of new. And let me see if I can go full screen. I don't remember how to go full screen. So let me get rid of that. And let me, wait, is this it? No. Okay. I can't make it bigger because I forgot how. So, okay. So what this is my work that is new, where I'm using data because Anthropic makes they have kind of like a nonprofit ethos alongside profit. It's like a public good corporation. So they make their data public. So using public Anthropic data, I was able to kind of work with their task data, and this is kind of the percentage of use by categories of tasks. There were 19,000 tasks. This is the percentage of use of Claude business queries, API queries, application programming interface queries that are mostly deciding and creating. Like big big thinking tasks are the most common thing businesses were delegating to Claude. 30% of the queries were deciding and creating strategy and creativity. A lot were maintaining and documenting, evaluating and analyzing are also like hard things that we teach students to do. Coaching, not so much. Guiding and coaching seems a lot more insulated. Well, although I take that back, because in everyday users, Claude Free and Pro everyday users, a lot of queries actually looped up to guiding and coaching. Much less so with ChatGPT. With ChatGPT, it was mostly maintaining and documenting resources or information, but still a lot of deciding and creating because it was writing. People were asking ChatGPT to do writing. So the ChatGPT is the one on the right, and that's from OpenAI, and the two on the left are Claude from Anthropic. Okay, and how that breaks down is working with computers, thinking creatively, analyzing data are really big ones, but they're a little bit different by like developing objectives, which is strategy. People were doing more with ChatGPT. So different types of people gravitate toward different tools. Okay, this is how I converted that to, I came up with kind of a strategy for converting that to exposure. What % of the task is AI exposed? And then I'm aggregating that up to the job. And the reason I'm doing that is because all of these different papers there's a bunch of different papers that have different job market projections for what jobs are going to be most exposed. I'm doing a meta-analysis of those and trying to use these latest data to kind of create my own that draws on the best of all of those models. So that's the goal. The model, so what I have here is, this is my estimate of the percent of the task that is automatable right now, is being automated right now. So evaluating and analyzing is the percent of the task that is most being automated by Claude and ChatGPT, so up to half. But a lot of things like moving objects, almost none is being automated. Managing and budgeting, surprisingly small amount is being automated. That's based on ChatGPT and Claude data. That's my calculations, but it's based on ChatGPT and Claude. Okay.
On the right is kind of my a priori before I looked at the ChatGPT and Claude data, and you see that my a priori of which tasks can be done by LLMs looks quite different from the empirical data. So my a priori was not very good. Then over here you have a totally different, very good empirical approach where people were asked which of these tasks can be automated in each of these different ways. It's a 23-point rubric, and that's by Brynjolfsson's team. And they use that to get task automatability. And you see that they don't have that much variation. And they have a really rigorous process, but they got different results. And that's what's happening with a lot of these projections. The results you get are a function of the method you choose. And so it makes it really hard to predict the future. Of course, if you could predict the future, we'd all be rich. So, that's always been the problem. So, okay, the last thing is that so this is kind of types of tasks and which part is, how much of them is being how much of Claude queries, that's GWA percent, what percent of Claude queries are falling within those categories? So that kind of adds to 100, that first column. So it all adds to 100%. So, and that's just everyday regular Claude queries. Okay, but then you have what percent of those queries are being fully automated versus augmented? And then what percent of business API queries are fully automated versus augmented? So you see that businesses, as I mentioned, are automating a much higher percent, but they're automating some things less than others. Guiding and coaching is much less automated, more augmented. Same thing with everyday queries, 30% for everyday user queries, only 30% are fully automated versus augmented. And also pretty low are communicating and acquiring information among regular users. So what this tells us is there's a lot of variability, and I also calculated kind of salary increments or decrements for each of these types of tasks. And, it is true that some of the highly automated tasks like deciding and creating or evaluating and analyzing, they have high salary decrements. The more your job does that thing, the more money you make on average. These are 2022 dollars, but, and those things are highly automated. But as we know, there's also this question of like expertise. The more expertise you have, the less vulnerable you are. So that goes back to the thing of like getting the master's degree, getting hands-on practice, getting confidence in doing the work before you hit the job market so that you have the skills when you hit the job market. So that's where I am. Truly, it is very much still in progress. But that's what I've been learning. I just wanted to share that. So now here's the next part of the discussion, which is what should we, in our teaching, what is it ethical to change and pivot? Where are we pivoting in a way that's ethical? And where are we refusing to pivot because it would not be appropriate to pivot because the skills don't change? So talk to your neighbor about that question for 2 minutes. Where should we pivot? Where should we hold firm? And then we'll spend the last few minutes discussing that question. So 2 minutes to discuss where should we pivot, where should we hold firm?
have to teach that.
you know, the business or whatever it is, sciences or natural science, but use that. But they've got to get out.
Problem. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, good to see you, Maria. Okay, let's come back together. They're telling me that we have to wrap up soon, and I know we have lunch after this. So let's just hear a couple of things that people are willing to die on that hill. What do we not pivot, or what are we morally compelled to pivot on? Just folks that really felt strongly in their groups.
So what we do is work with students who are working with nonprofits, and it's a lot of like reframing a personal narrative. So personal reflection is something that you can augment, I guess, like through AI to ask guiding questions. Like, okay, you said that going to that panel was insightful. Well, what about that struck you personally? Like, what made you, like, what moment did that have you reflect on, right? And asking it in more of that coaching way to guide it, I think is fine, but you can't replicate the, process of reflecting and outsource that.
That is a great one. Tell me your name. Soccer. Thank you for that. And so other ones that you'll die on the hill, we have to keep teaching it, or we have to pivot. One more. There's two more. So first and back, and then to Kate.
So my name is Tabitha, I'm CAS, and talking with Kenzie, we brought up a lot of different examples and ultimately came down to like where to hold firm, like on authenticity. So Kenzie gave the example of people using ChatGPT to write thank you cards. That really made us like,
Ooh.
like what's the purpose of a thank you card? Is the purpose to get like a beautifully written, poetic masterpiece of a thank you card? Or is it for that person to like feel the emotion? So the human elements, the reflection, the emotion, the gratitude, like the personal
Huge.
connection.
It's huge.
Actually, AI might be really helpful for us in helping us see how valuable those things are.
That is such a good point, Tabitha. And to Kate for final comment.
Oh no, that was a better one.
Really? Oh, interpretation.
That's something that came up as low risk of automation, communication, and interpretation, and that kind of nexus, which is huge in history and in humanities and social media and all, I guess, disciplines. So we can like really not outsource interpretation.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. One more comment. Yes.
My name's Alyssa with the Career Center. Just a pop culture reference. I recently went back and rewatched the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix from 2012, 2013. It's so interesting to watch that in this very moment because for those who have seen it or haven't seen it, he's writing. His job is to produce thoughtful, sentimental letters on behalf of his clients. So he's authoring
Gross.
letters and trying to capture the voices. And it's like basically outsourced.
Yeah, you can't outsource authenticity. Thank you guys for coming. This is the QR code to fill out the feedback form. And really, thank you for your time, thoughts, and energy and all the work that you're doing.